For more on the life of Muhammad Ali, we're joined by Zareena Grewal. She's an associate professor of American Studies, Religious Studies, and Ethnicity, Race, and Migration at Yale. She's also the author of Islam is a Foreign Country. Obviously a world-class fighter, but not just in the ring, but outside it as well. Just a remarkable life. How will you remember him?
Oh, I remember him, of course, as a social justice champion, as well as an incredible athlete, a cultural icon, but also as a radical Muslim and as an advocate for Black liberation. And I think that is. Right now we think of his fight for peace, his fight for social justice as sort of quintessentially American, and his stance against anti-racism is all sort of being very American. We've embraced him. We forget that at the time he was sort of reviled in the U.S. And I want us to also be able to kind of imagine those things as being also Islamic. They were politically radical. They were also rooted in his religious beliefs, and they are. We should now recognize that, I think, in this moment as part of his Black identity, part of his Muslim identity, as well as his American identity.
Well, you brought it up in 1967, signing his religious beliefs, a conscientious objector, refusing to be inducted into the military. He's known for that famous quote, "If I thought the war was going to bring freedom and equality to 22 million of my people, they wouldn't have to draft me. I'd join tomorrow. I have nothing to lose by standing up for my beliefs." But he did lose quite a bit. He was in the prime of his career. He put it all on the line because of his principles.
That's right, and it's truly remarkable. At the prime of his career, to lose so much financially in terms of the potential of his career, but he wasn't making that kind of a calculus. I mean, he was really a man of incredible conviction and courage, and it's extraordinary to look back on that moment and think, here was someone who just refused to kill. A man who fought in the ring, but said, "I refuse to kill because I don't believe in this war." And to have just that courage to stand up for peace and say, "I don't believe in war," it was just extraordinary. It was a politically unpopular thing to do. Both Democrats, and this was Lyndon Johnson's war at that moment, and so both Democrats and Republicans were at that moment it was very unpopular to be anti-war, and he took that very unpopular stance. And now, of course, history, we remember it differently. We've all sort of come around to see Vietnam as a mistake, many of us. And so he's been embraced in a different kind of way. But at the time, it was incredibly courageous.
Yeah, we heard Jesse Jackson in Sean's piece talking about his relationship with Martin Luther King Jr., active in the civil rights movement, both of them sharing the belief against the Vietnam War. And as you said, at the time, very unpopular decisions. And in fact, if he had gone into the military, he probably would have made millions and been the poster child. He just wouldn't do it.
Right. And you have to remember that at the time, many Muslims in the Nation of Islam, they were not draft dodgers. They were conscientious objectors, and they were refusing to fight in the war. And many of them did serve prison terms. So he was actually part of an entire community that was, taking this political stance. Of course, he was just the most famous Muslim in the world when he did it. He became the heavyweight champion, and the next day announced that he was a Muslim, and so he just immediately became the most famous Muslim in the world, and so that's why it sort of became this, a huge thing that linked Islam to this political stance. But in fact, his dissent was part and parcel of what an entire community of African American Muslims were doing at the time.
Yeah, he also talked about being a Black athlete or a Black entertainer, that you have a lot of influence. He said this on the Today Show years ago, and said he'd like to do all he could to uplift people morally and spiritually. He chose a different path, stood with Nelson Mandela against apartheid. He secured the release of hostages in Iraq, talked a man off a ledge who was considering committing suicide. The list goes on and on. It's really, truly remarkable, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, people wrongly, I think, are characterizing him as slowly transcending race or becoming less radical over time. That's actually not the case. He was actually quite consistent in his commitment to peaceful dissent throughout his life. If you remember, it's not just the Iraqi hostages, but also in the Iran hostage crisis. He said that while he sympathized with some of the frustrations with U.S. foreign policy, but he was against using violent methods to in that kind of way. And actually, his he offered to take the place of the Iranian hostages, and as a result, the militant students in Iran had to release African American and women who they had been holding hostage. That was actually a direct result of what his statement. So this was, and even with Trayvon Martin, tweeting out a hoodie shot. I mean, this is from the beginning of his career to the end of his life. He was very consistent in supporting peaceful dissent, anti-racism, social justice around the world. He saw the fight against white supremacy and anti-colonial movements as connected and global, as well as a local problem within the U.S., and that was consistent throughout his life.
Clearly a unique figure. Zareena, thanks so much for your thoughts. Appreciate it.
If you like what you just saw, follow us on social media and visit our website, cctv-america.com.